Good evening or good morning, folks. It is about 20 after 2 GMT time on the 17th. It's about 20 after 9 my time. It looks like markets are probably going to be a little bit tricky on the Forex side. I think we're probably going to only see opportunities for smaller trades before FOMC. So with that, definitely take caution on your entries and manage your trades aggressively. Move to break even pretty quickly. All right, let's get started. Looking at pound New Zealand dollar on the daily here, and I had a little triangle for the daily consolidation, which did break yesterday, but I'm not too interested to short this pair. As you can see that where we are at now, about 204.50 has been kind of a support and resistance area. You can see it with all the spikes here, and then back here you can see where it was support and then resistance, and then in the middle here, kind of a pivot area. So the problem with this is you can see the spikes we get on this pair. They were quite large on the 4-hour too. So rather than short the triangle break, tentatively what I would look for is a spike down to where the EMAs are starting to converge here, which is around the monthly pivot, and then a break back above WS1, which puts us above 2.04 as well, and then try and trade that perhaps all the way back up to 2.1. And I think a lot of movement on the crosses and pairs in general is probably going to hinge on whether or not we see dollar strength this week, which is the main reason I think we're not going to see much before FOMC. All right, so let's take a look at pound CAD. This is on the 4-hour. You can see that we've kind of just been sitting and bouncing around the 4-hour 55 and the weekly pivot, which is also our 50% fib. So I will look for pressure into the 55 and then my entry preferably above the weekly pivot. And I'll probably look to take profit at the midterm fib instead of WR1. Normally I would look for a move up to WR1 or even WR2, but again, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of movement at the beginning of the week. All right, pound odd is in pretty much the same boat, still waiting for an entry here with potential pressure first into the 4-hour sell band. That's the Momentum Master sell band, or the 4-hour 55, and then I'll look for an entry to trade that back up. Pound yen looks like it may also be trying to give us an entry as well. We've had a couple kind of smaller rejections of the 4-hour 55, so I'll look for a move back down towards that early in London session, and then a rejection signal from there to take a long, targeting last week's high, which also is MR1 and pretty close to WR1 and that midterm fib there. Pound US dollar is where we start to see Forex be a little bit tricky this week, and that's just going to get worse as we continue to look at pairs. We've broken above the daily 55, which, if we take a look at the daily chart, of course, has been pretty important for a while now. And you can see that we struggled here to break above it and moved a pretty good distance away before breaking it, I'm sure, on news. So we've hit MR1, and we are on the buy side of our 34.55 cross and also above the 200 EMA on the 4-hour, and we closed up last week. So you can see I have yellow fib, which is a buy fib. But on the daily, and of course, just looking at the daily, we're potentially still in a downtrend, or I'd say we are still in a downtrend. It's a little bit early to call it a reversal yet. And you can see I have another fib from the daily. I actually have a fib from the daily and the weekly. But in this case, I have last month's high to last month's low. If we go back to the 4-hour chart, you can see that we made a pretty strong rejection off of the 78.6 fib towards the beginning of the week. So our options here are to look for a long off of the daily 55, which I will probably not trade the first bounce off of it, as I assume we will test it more than once. The other option is a break below the daily 55, I'll pull back, and then a short setup, which we do have the 4-hour EMAs as well as the 4-hour Dynafibs in the way. So move your stop to break even pretty quickly if you take the short setup, but potentially we could catch a trade there that is a continuation of the downtrend. Theoretically, if we did happen to get a decent amount of movement and I could get 70 or 80 pips away from break even, I would consider holding this trade through FOMC with hopes that on the spread increase, I don't get taken out of break even, and we see the beginning of the continuation of the downtrend, which can give us a substantial move. Again, that's a risky option, and you need to be substantially away from break even. You need to have enough pips where your stop, your break even stop, isn't going to get jumped by spreads and volatility. Also, I don't think that scenario is very likely, as I don't think we'll see that much movement before FOMC. All right, so taking a look at Euro New Zealand dollar, we've had a bit of New Zealand dollar strength so far this week. We'll see if that continues. I don't really see a trade happening here with the trend, unless it's after FOMC where we get a spike up, but potentially we could trade off the weekly pivot and 4-hour 55. The other option here is a counter trend trade off of WS2, which is just about 1.5. So in the 1.5 area, we may see a possible counter trend trade. I'm personally probably not going to take that. I think there's better opportunities on other pairs where we don't have to trade counter trend. All right, EuroCAD on daily is pretty much a disaster. You can see I am looking at the daily. I have several lines here for a triangle, one of which broke. We are sitting right on the bottom of the Dynafib bands, which is they're pretty wide currently because we've been ranging. The only EMA that's really been in play with any decency is going to be the daily 200. Potentially, though, if we do get a move back up to the daily 55 and we see strong resistance there, we could trade that down to WS1, which would be the intersection of the lower trend line. Again, not really an option that I would prefer to trade, as it is on the riskier side. On 5-minute, maybe it's decent. You get a break even pretty quick. There's a decent amount of room there, but not the ideal, but it is an option. Okay, Euro AUD, we're currently moving down into our 2 daily EMAs, and we are in the 4-hour Dynafibs. So potentially a move back up, basically from where we're at now, definitely with strong confirmation, as we do have the 4-hour 55 to contend with inside of that trade, so be careful there. but it looks like we may get set up to long. Euro JPY has had a break below the weekly pivot in 4-hour 55 and also break back below the sell Dynafib. So I'd like to see a retest of 135 and then a short signal here. All New Zealand dollar kind of in the same boat as pound New Zealand dollar was, or not pound New Zealand dollar, Euro New Zealand dollar. We've continued to move down for the week. We're getting pretty far out now. Options are counter trend trades at WS1 earlier in the week, or perhaps WS2, depending on FMOC news. If we get a spike up to the weekly pivot, we could see a short from there. Again, that's probably going to be after FOMC. AUD-CAD still kind of ranging, but we have seen some more negative Australian news and a little bit more positive Canadian news. And we do have our 4-hour EMAs right here, so potentially we could see a move up into or near that area, followed by a clean break below the weekly pivot. Ideally, you're going to have to move your stop and break even pretty quickly because we have this area to contend with. So we could wait until there's a solid break below that area as well, which is about 96.50 roughly. All JPY, I had a daily fib on here, but I've changed it kind of the last push down. So that is January 28th's high to February 3rd's low. And you can see that that puts us just above the 50% fib currently. I'd like to see a little bit more of a push into the 4-hour 55, even though we've kind of been hanging out right there on it, followed by a break below the weekly pivot for a short. Again, the more likely scenario is probably that we just continue to go sideways. We'll see what happens there. AUD USD, you can see that I have the daily fib in place here, which pretty much what it looked like on AUD JPY. They look just about the same. Here we're breaking slightly above the 4-hour 55. Potentially we could see a reversal at the Dynafibs. However, I'd be careful with that, as potentially if we are going to get bigger pullbacks, we're pretty likely to come up to WR2 and the 4-hour 200. You can see if I fib this the same way that I fib on JPY, that our 50% puts us right around the bearish 4-hour Dynafib. So that's kind of my bearish limit for this week. I would take a short if we get a rejection signal there, but if it looks a little mixed or we get a solid break above that area, I won't look to trade AUD USD until after FOMC. New Zealand dollar CAD, again, we're kind of out from really anything to trade against. We'd need to pull back down to the weekly pivot 4-hour 55. Potentially, we could see a counter trend trade at WR1, since we've already moved close to there and moved away once, but we could also see price rocket through there, and then we'd be looking at WR2 for our counter trend options. Again, with this system, we have so many options to trade, even outside of Forex. I haven't taken a counter trend trade in Forex in quite a while. New Zealand dollar JPY, our 4-hour M pattern, or I'm sorry, this is the daily. Our daily M pattern completed, and actually wasn't the technical M pattern, as we did cover more pips than what the height was. The height was 400, and the break was about 650. However, the question here is, are we just going to rock it through the EMAs on the New Zealand dollar strength and continue up, or we'll see a short? The daily 55 has been pretty important if you look back over the chart. So as long as we are below that, I am opt to take a short. And even though we have the daily 200 here, a rejection of the daily 55 would have me looking for a short with aggressive trade management. New Zealand dollar USD looks pretty much the same. We're currently smacking into the 4-hour 200. Potentially we could move up to the daily 55 if we start to see US dollar strength kick in before FOMC. This may be a good opportunity to short, as it is one of the pairs where we have a little bit more room to work with before we hit the 4-hour 55 weekly pivot combo. That being said, you still definitely want to be at break even by the time you hit the Dynafibs. USD CAD, I've got a fib on the daily, but I think we could potentially see a long before we get back to that area. We've got a decent level of support right in this area, which currently is coinciding with our 4-hour Dynafibs. And then the horizontal support and resistance 124. So we could see a potential long from that area, and then of course our roadblock in the way. We have the midterm fib, and we also have the 4-hour 55. So yet another pair where we could potentially see a good setup and need to go to break even pretty quickly because there's just a lot of stuff in the way. If we do break below 124 and we consolidate below it and stay there, or get a retest and a solid rejection, we look for price to definitely come back to at least the 4-hour 200, if not to 122. US yen on the daily, or fibs from the daily, sorry. Fib from the daily for a potential long. We're once again sitting on the 50% fib and around 118.30, which has been previous support. There was a nice trade from there last week. So I'll look for another push down to super convergence zone, 4-hour 200s right above that, and that is our bearish Dynafib. So we get a push into all that and then a solid rejection. We can see a nice move up. Again, we have the 4-hour 55 in the way. And this one, like pound USD, potentially if you want to try and catch the bigger move, if we get 60 or 70 pips away from break even, you could hold through FOMC. Of course, that is the riskier option, kind of gambling on a large move, and if it doesn't come, more than likely settling for break even. All right, Euro USD. So we started out inside the 4-hour Dynafibs, and we've broken the 4-hour 55. So beginning of London, look for a move back up into the 4-hour 55 weekly pivot, and a rejection there for a short trade. Pretty standard there. Again, I'm not looking for a real large move before FOMC on this. So we've got about 70 pips between the weekly pivot and WS1. I might try and see if I traded this pair, if we could hit the midterm fib. That gives us a little bit more. That is kind of pushing the daily ranges, though, at that point. All right, so that does it for me for the week. Again, be careful. Look for smaller trades before FOMC. We'll see what shakes out. I think more than likely it's probably going to be a sideways week until the news. Happy trading, everybody. Good luck.